Next time someone laughs at Morning Glory Milking Farm, they better ask themselves, what are you producing for the machine? And when was the last time you were milked for someone else's profit? I originally picked up Morning Glory Milking Farm because I thought that I would be making a roast video right now. It just seemed like it had all the elements of a ridiculous, smutty book that I could make fun of. The premise is literally about working at a milking farm where you have to milk minotaurs, and the main character is a human woman who ends up falling for a minotaur that she's milking. But I decided to take a different direction for this video because, you see, I can't make fun of this book. It wouldn't be right. Because what I've come to find while reading this is that this is not just simple smut. Morning Glory Milking Farm is actually a profound critique of late-stage capitalism and toxic masculinity. So in this video, I'm gonna break down exactly how the book explores these themes, because if you really read between the lines, you'll see that behind every moan is a Marxist message, and behind every minotaur is a lot to unpack. Literally, because those balls are huge. So anyway, if this video ends up getting demonetized, this just goes to show that YouTube is clearly anti-intellectual because there's nothing inappropriate about free thinking. I will read out loud quotes from this text so that you can really see how deep the writing is, balls deep, you could say. And I hope that this video inspires people to think more critically about the books that they consume, and for more writers to create stories that are compelling and culturally relevant like this one. This is a skill that you have to practice. And you can even get help from writing classes like the ones at Craftsy, which is the sponsor of today's video. Craftsy is an online resource for all things creative. For the writing classes that I checked out, there is one that is by Tiffany D. Jackson, who is a really talented thriller YA writer. Her class is called Fiction 101. But I've seen other fun categories on Craftsy too, like there's one for cake decorating. Rachel Tefel has a really fun one called Textured Floral Accents. And this one is really great because there's no piping skills needed. I really appreciate that she shows you how to make this Swiss meringue buttercream and to properly color the buttercream. And I can connect with other people who are doing other crafts and DIY, which is a great way to share ideas and stay inspired. And Craftsy is always creating new classes, so there's always more reasons to come back. And as a member, you get access to live streaming tutorials and engage with the community in real time. So if you would like to check it out, the first 1,000 people who click on the link in my description will get a full year of premium membership for only $1.49. This offer is valid for new members only. Otherwise, let's move on and talk about other creative things, like how this smutty book about a milking farm is actually a deep allegory for Marxism. So at first glance, Morning Glory Milking Farm seems like it has a strange, kooky premise. The story is about a financially desperate human woman who takes a job manually stimulating anthropomorphic minotaurs for pharmaceutical semen-grade extraction. But when you view it through a critical, theoretical lens, and preferably a pair of latex gloves, it becomes more apparent that the text is not mere smut, but a sophisticated allegory exploring the intersection of neoliberal economic structures and the disintegration of traditional masculine identity. Let's start with our main protagonist, Violet. She is your typical down-on-your-luck mid-20s millennial woman who is educated, unemployed, burdened with student debt, and desperate for a job. Any job to make ends meet. Some of you broke bitches could relate in today's job market, and we got a recession coming up to look forward to. This is how she ends up applying to become a milking technician at Morning Glory Milking Farm, and this is a pharmaceutical company that's part of an underground industry that helps human men achieve erections with a little blue pill. But an essential ingredient to these Viagra dupes that we have is the minotaur semen, because minotaurs are much more virile. So as the milking technician, Violet is part of the several employees that are responsible for milking minotaurs in order to collect more liquid units. Essentially, this whole setup shows that Violet is doing what many have done before her. She is selling bodily labor in exchange for fleeting stability. This goes to show how financial desperation often overrides social taboos or personal discomfort. Yeah, you might think that this whole setup setup is weird, but I know some of you American bitches would do the same thing for dental coverage. This actually parallels a lot of the real world gig economy out there, whether that's rideshare drivers or OnlyFans creators. Violet's work is both hyper-personal and undervalued. She becomes hired not because of her humanity, but because of her dexterity. Her entry into the specialized extractive services of milking those milkers mirrors the experience of gig workers who are commodifying their time and bodies to survive late-stage capitalism. That means Violet, the protagonist, is not a heroine in the classical sense, but a symbolic representation of the proletariat, who is alienated from both her labor and her self-conception. Just like Marx's factory worker, she is selling her body's time and function, and that is the central conceit of Morning Glory Milking Farm. It is the industrialized collection of sexual labor for corporate purposes that makes it deeply Marxist. It is titillating, emphasis on the tit. Let's talk about how this strange workplace symbolizes the gig economy and the milking of labor. So the physical environment of this workplace actually captures the dehumanizing touch of capitalism. When she first approaches the building on her first day, she observes that the aesthetic design of the building goes out of its way to invoke the friendly feeling of a neighborhood farmstead, both inside and out. There's artificial turf in the lobby with the ceiling painted to look like a summer sky. There's bright colors that are supposed to invoke tractors and richly painted barns, and there's even milk glass vases of daisies on a bunch of surfaces. Basically, there's like a farmhouse aesthetic going on, but that ends when she enters the sterile white hallways of the employee corridors. So the setting of the artificial farmstead transitioning to a sterile professional clinic satirizes how capitalism finds ways to monetize even the most intimate or animalistic ways of existence. The clients aren't treated like sentient beings with feelings, but like producers of a commodity, literally bottled Minotaur essence. And even the process of collecting bottled Minotaur essence shows the clinical nature. For example, Violet observes a training video of another technician. This text says, Violet began to breathe hard when the technician released her hands, letting the oiled cock bob as she took up one of the silver nozzlers. The hum of the machine's air compressor was a steady white noise in the video, the mechanical arms within already pistoning, creating the rhythmic suction the Minotaur was about to experience. Sure enough, the big bull grunted and jerked as the cylinder was eased down his straining cock, lowing deeply as the machine did its work. I'd like to continue providing manual stimulation at this point, the technician advised, and Violet whimpered, the same reaction she had had each time she replayed this section numerous times the night before, when the woman on the video began to rub at the huge swollen testicles, pulling and squeezing as the Minotaur bucked against the table. Remember, the aim is a plentiful, speedy collection. I want to emphasize that last quote here. You're here for collection, not conversation. It is an emphasis on the depersonalized nature of labor under capitalism. Workers and clients alike are reduced to function, extraction, efficiency, and profitability. The framing of this work here, where you are jacking off the Minotaur's penis, is not seen as exotic or rebellious, but now, it's eerily echoing the numbness and overemphasis of efficiency, much like Amazon warehouses or Uber's flexibility with getting multiple ride shares to make ends meet. Another quote from the workplace says, the collection floor needed to be clinically clean. That was the first step covered in training before even entering the room. Violet underlined the heading in her training binder, adding stars to either side of the boldface lettering in an effort to emphasize the importance in her mind. Collection floor, clinically clean. You just want to follow the steps. It's really that simple. Keep the workspace clean. It makes it easier for the next tech and keeps the day moving. You don't want to fall behind because someone else didn't call for a cleanup, because once you're behind, you'll be behind all afternoon. Don't be the tech who throws off someone's whole day. This quote shows that the milking farm isn't just a workplace where monster human relations are milked literally and figuratively for profit. If anything, it is the dystopian endpoint of gig economy labor. Capitalism in this world doesn't just commodify products. It commodifies pleasure, privacy, and the one sacred line between the erotic and professional. It's basically like Uber, but for hand jobs. And like all gig work, it pretends to be empowering while systematically exploiting workers. Workers clock in, extract with the tug jobs, and then clock out. The flesh has now become transactional. And there are no unions at this milking farm, no PTO, just a clipboard, some gloves, and an awkward conversation with a very large man bull as you're staring at his juicy balls. There's a very deliberate choice when choosing to center their romance in this world around minotaurs. It's not because we're appealing to the monster fuckers out there. It's much deeper than that, because the minotaurs represent more than erotic fantasy. We often know them as hulking, stoic, performatively virile, and it's really interesting how they are essentially caricatures of the late capitalist male. You can see how their exaggerated masculinity with their horns, their bulk, their libido, even the excess gush of their semen just pouring out on the floors everywhere that makes the technicians have to clean up everything. All of that shows that it's not liberating but confining. There's a conversation that the main character has with her love interest when she's asking if other minotaurs know about this whole setup of other minotaurs coming to the milking farm, literally and figuratively coming. She says, "I don't know why I thought this place was unique. So do all minotaurs know about this?" He says, "Oh, they know all right. Most bulls do it. And if they haven't yet, believe me, they're thinking about it. There's no reason not to. Humans have commodified us, and the financial compensation for a natural bodily function is a no-brainer, especially once there's a mortgage to think about. Family men, forget about it. How else would they be able to take the kids to Blinksy Land? May as well get paid for what's going down the shower drain every day." He even says that they measure their balls. His balls hung fat and full, impressive regardless of the species, and if there was some sort of test they were required to pass, Violet had no doubt that his would have outshone any they were judged against. The bigger the testicles, the higher the rate of production, so they want to know that we're going to help them hit their acquisition targets. Notice how traditionally, the symbol of male virility and rage has now been de-skilled. He is no longer a mythic beast, but an overworked client. His horns have become corporate branding. His libido is now tracked via performance analytics. Each milking session is a parody of both intimacy and productivity. These minotaurs are paid not to feel, but to release. So the tragic figures of the hyper-masculine ideal, quite literally horned, hulking, and emotionally constipated, have now been reduced to walking and sitting symbols of toxic masculinity. They're pressured to perform, to dominate, and above all, to produce. Their enormous needs are no longer a source of pride, but of dysfunction. They are not lovers, but actually livestock in a system that sees their bodies as resources and their intimacy and vulnerability as a kink to be monetized. What normally would be a simple intimate activity that a lone minotaur could do in the privacy of his own home, clogging the shower drain with his big fat semen, has now become a ritual of clinical ejaculation, which is symbolic of how the masculine archetype has now been reduced to function. But what makes the love interest in this book special is that he actually is a subversion of patriarchal ideals. He's ironically less monstrous than a lot of typical human men in romance novels. He's respectful, he's vulnerable, he's emotionally open. At one point, Violet has a hard day at work, hard literally and figuratively. She's trying not to cry as she's trying to get the job done, and one of her clients tells her instructions and explains condescendingly about what she should try to do, even calling her a sweetheart in a very negative tone. And it just really sucks to feel so dehumanized like that. And then later on, she sees her next client, which is a minotaur that she had been attracted to upon her first meeting, named Rook. Their next meeting, which was a surprise because she didn't even expect to see him again, is such a refreshing contrast to the awful experience that she had before, because he's gentle to her. He asks her questions like if she's in school, do they treat her well here? Just basically questions about her life, essentially humanizing her more instead of just another cog in the machine. And so it shows how, as a love interest, he's being patient, honest, and gentle, and he is a rejection of the cold, emotionally stunted alpha stereotype. What's most intriguing is that he becomes romantically interested in Violet, which shows that what he's seeking through this cold clinical environment is not relief, but relationship. This suggests that even hypermasculinity beings yearn for intimacy in a society that often expects them to repress it. But there's an internal conflict going on inside Violet as she deals with her own romantic feelings for her client. But as we see throughout the book, what she learns might be the solution to dismantling the system. The first time she meets Rook, the love interest, she is instantly attracted, especially being in such close proximity and intimacy. For example, in the scene of their first meeting, she says, "Please just let me know if I'm using too much pressure." She called out hesitantly, having her Kirime say similar things to clients brand new to the farm. Or not enough pressure, just let me know. A short grunt was her only response, and she shrugged to herself, gripping the turgid length once more. He definitely responded to that. You weren't imagining it. There was nothing on his chart, she read from where it was propped on the table before her. No preferences, no technician notes, nothing more than his initials in age and weight, followed by the 8-digit identification number and barcode, matching that of the adhesive label that she would affix to his bottle. No noted preference, but as she slipped her finger beneath the loose pucker of skin once more, the Minotaur grunted again, his breath hitching when she circled around the flared underside. There's an interesting juggle of these two different feelings going on, where you're trying to be professional and responsible. You're literally diluting each Minotaur as clients that only have identification numbers, no technician notes, only basic stats. Despite all that, she can't help but want that big, bold dick. And that is the spark of a revolutionary mindset. Later at home, she flicks the bean of her own coochie and imagines him while doing that. In fact, she imagines him in all kinds of scenarios that wouldn't be appropriate for the workplace. And it's not until post-nut clarity that she's thinking to herself, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I thinking about him? You need to remember that he's just a nameless, faceless client, and you probably won't even see him again. She even thinks about how other employees aren't reacting the way that she does. The other clock watchers almost never displayed any tells, never showed anything but impatience and stoicism, and she knew it was inappropriate to feel a thrill over forcing a reaction from him, and even less so to register that thrill directly between her thighs, a tingle that ignited when he repeated the motion. In this text, we see that the tingling sensation in her coochie is actually the tingling sensation of a Marxist revolution. This perpetuates even with external barriers. Like in this line here, when they're having a conversation and getting along, she says, "Orcs are super tough, right?" He harrumphed at that, and she smiled, wishing she could lean up and place a soft kiss to the shiny pink crescent of that domed helmet, just barely peeking out from his fleshy confines. If there wasn't a camera, you'd suck out his soul. That thought that she had in her head really shows how she is confined to a surveillance society of this milking farm, knowing that there are cameras out there that would see her literally sucking the soul out of his dick, but her desires are just rapidly growing stronger with each interaction that she has with Rook. This is not just her wanting to get the milky, sucky, sucky. This is a defiant reclaiming of bodily autonomy. These characters dare to defy it even more by deciding to meet up outside of the workplace and going on a dinner date. They continue connecting romantically, and it's after that that she decides she needs to stop half-assing her feelings and just go for it. The text says she needed to stop waffling, stop waiting for things to happen on their own, stop letting the uptight little voice in her head convince her that there was no way he would be interested in a relationship with someone of her species, of her financial situation, with her at all. Maybe Gillis was right. Maybe she should take off her panties. Maybe you just shouldn't wear them. Maybe it's time to take this bull by the horns. Her taking the bull by the horns is both literal and metaphorical. She takes the reins for her own individual agency despite external limitations and systemic oppression. So now we really see how brilliant this book is, because by centering a female protagonist who navigates economic uncertainty not by succumbing to despair, but by building connection, the author is essentially reframing erotic labor not as degradation, but as reclamation. Violet does not simply perform labor. She transforms it. She recognizes the Minotaur's emotional needs, dismantles workplace hierarchies through empathy, and perhaps most radically, chooses to feel something like horniness in a system engineered to numb. And she's not the only one who is changing too. So is Rook, and we really see this in the scene where they finally have sex. She had never fully appreciated how enormous he was. In the wide open milking room where he towered over her on the upper level, there was no accurate scope. When they walked through Camper Creek or crowded into one of the always busy little bars or restaurants there, they were surrounded by towering orcs and ogres, trolls and mothmen and small-statured elves and goblins, obliterating her sense of what was normal or not. Here in her apartment, though, he seemed larger than life and completely out of place. It's alright, it's fine. He's going to find his place right here, between your legs. You're making it very hard to be a gentleman, he repeated, standing over where she sat on the edge of the bed, thighs parted. Is that the only thing that's hard? Violet says. Him claiming that it's literally and figuratively hard to remain a gentleman shows that his masculinity is finally being recognized in an environment that's not sterile, and finally has found a place to thrive in a healthy way between her legs. This shows how Violet's presence offers something that the system denies: humanity, care, and a happy ending. By daring to care in a world that only extracts, she's not just jerking them off, she's jerking society out of patriarchal discomfort. It was a waste, a terrible, awful waste, bottling his potent release and sending it off to be refined into little blue pills for human men. Now that she knew how sweet it was on her tongue, how good it felt to be filled until it ran down her thighs and made a mess of the towels upon the sheets, she hated the idea of him selling it. This particular text shows the radical act of demodifying intimacy in a world that treats it as a transaction. Now that the characters have opened their eyes to this new radical viewpoint, it rewards them with a happily ever after ending where Violet gets a new job, a new apartment, and she is in a happy relationship with her big dick minotaur Rook. In conclusion, this book dares to say what few are brave enough to whisper, that we are all just creatures in heat, trapped in a barn built by Jeff Bezos, hoping someone will look past our horns and see our hearts. My conclusion is that Morning Glory Milking Farm is not just a quirky Kindle Unlimited book, but really a sharp commentary on the economics of desire, the implosion of masculine ideals, and the absurdity of commodified intimacy. It critiques our socioeconomic machinery through vigorous handjobs that really only to the most intellectual of readers out there like you and I could truly see between the lines. So to dismiss this novel as just monster smut is to dismiss the point entirely. This is not erotic fiction where you're jacking off a minotaur because his balls are so deep and huge that he's gotta explode. If anything, this is a roadmap for emotional revolution, one milking session at a time. And so I leave you with this. Next time someone laughs at Morning Glory Milking Farm, they better ask themselves, what are you producing for the machine? And when was the last time you were milked for someone else's profit? I hope that watching this video has helped open your eyes. If there's any book out there that has been perceived as ridiculous smut, feel free to send recommendations my way, and I'm more than happy to break them down into how they are actually deep political commentary. Until then, I will see you next time. Goodbye.